This is Alex Mercer. 6 months into the apocalypse, the survivors have finally accepted what they spent the first months denying. The old world is gone, and nothing resembling normal life is coming back. The realization hits differently for everyone, some with quiet resignation, others with a simmering bitterness, but the effect is universal. Life has become a series of rituals meant not to bring comfort, but to ensure that tomorrow happens. Settlements rise with the sun, alarms echoing across makeshift walls as people drag themselves from thin sleeping mats and take their places in the rigid routines that have become the backbone of survival. Patrol rotations, crop tending, scavenging assignments, night watch schedules. Everything is planned down to the minute. If it isn't, people die. No one needs to say it aloud anymore. It hangs in the air like a permanent truth, as common as the stench of smoke and decay. The survivors don't fight the routines. They cling to them. Routine is safety. Routine is sanity. Routine is what keeps the infected from slipping past the gate or a raider group from catching the settlement off guard. In a world that no longer follows rules, humans have had to create their own. But the people who have lasted this long are not the same ones who stumbled, terrified, through the first weeks of chaos. 6 months of constant alertness has carved them into harder shapes. Their eyes are sharper, movements quieter, decisions quicker. They hesitate less, trust less, feel less. Mercy, once considered a virtue, has become a liability many can no longer afford. They don't waste bullets. They don't waste breath. They don't even waste emotions unless absolutely necessary. Every decision is weighed against the cold calculus of survival. Some call it pragmatism. Others call it losing their humanity. But no one dares say it too loudly. Everyone knows that softness is what gets people killed. That's why newcomers are met not with open arms, but with guarded stares, rifles half lowered, questions asked in clipped, wary tones. Any stranger could be carrying infection, desperation, lies, or danger. Entire settlements have fallen because they trusted the wrong face. The world has shrunk into isolated pockets of life, and every one of them is desperate to protect what little they have. A new arrival isn't just a person. They're a risk, a disruption, a possible destroyer of fragile stability. People are interviewed, inspected, quarantined. Some settlements turn strangers away without a second thought. Others test them with tasks, watching how they react under pressure. A few, especially those hardened beyond repair, shoot first and never bother learning names. Paranoia has become so commonplace that distrust is the default language of humanity. Yet the worst enemy many survivors face isn't the infected clawing at the gates or the raiders lurking beyond the tree line. It's the trauma lodged deep within their own minds. PTSD has become an unseen epidemic spreading through every camp and settlement. People snap without warning, lashing out in sudden bursts of anger over nothing. Others drift through the days numb and hollow, unable to feel fear, joy, or grief anymore. Night terrors echo inside tents. Screams are as common as the howling wind. Some survivors refuse to sleep at all, terrified of the memories that wait in the darkness. Others stop talking entirely, shutting down as though words themselves are too heavy to carry. Mental breaks are treated like infections, dangerous, unpredictable, something to manage quietly and carefully. No one judges anymore. How could they? Everyone is hurting. Everyone has lost someone. Everyone is surviving on bruised hearts and frayed nerves. But the apocalypse doesn't slow down for emotional wounds. There is no time for healing, not yet. These are the hard lessons of survival. Routine keeps you alive. Instinct guides your choices. Strangers are threats until proven otherwise, and trauma becomes a permanent companion. 6 months in, humanity isn't rebuilding. It's enduring, scarred, tougher than before, and still fighting to exist in a world determined to erase it. By the 6-month mark, the scattered pockets of surviving humanity have begun to resemble tiny nations rather than improvised shelters clinging to life. What started as a handful of people huddled around campfires or barricaded inside school gyms has grown into structured communities with boundaries, rules, and a sense of identity. Each settlement, shaped by the personalities and values of its leaders, begins to define who they are and who they are not. Territory lines are marked with painted stones, hanging lanterns, or makeshift fences welded from scrap metal. Some communities put up wooden signs declaring themselves Safe Haven, New Dawn, or Redwater Commune. Others simply erect spikes and warning flags, symbols that say everything without a single word. Borders matter now. They are the difference between order and chaos, protection and invasion, life and a slow, brutal death. Guard towers rise over these new micronations, rough constructions of scavenged lumber or twisted rebar, but they serve their purpose. At every tower, volunteers or appointed sentinels watch non-stop, scanning the tree line, rooftops, and roads for movement. Their scopes sweep across both infected and human threats with equal caution. Checkpoints operate like frontier-era outposts, where anyone approaching must lower their weapons, announce their intentions, and often submit to a series of questions before being allowed inside. Even allies are inspected. The memory of settlements falling to infiltrators, raiders, or desperate wanderers is too fresh to ignore. What used to be communities are now fortified enclaves, where safety is earned, not assumed. Inside these walls, leadership structures solidify. Some settlements, especially those founded by former teachers, community organizers, or idealists, draft written documents outlining rights, responsibilities, and procedures. Their constitutions are simple compared to the ones that governed nations before, but they represent hope, a belief that society can be rebuilt on fairness and cooperation. Decisions are made by councils. Disputes are settled through votes or mediated discussions. Even those who disagree usually respect the process, because the alternative is slipping into the brutality that swallowed the rest of the world. But other settlements have embraced a darker form of order. In these places, a single strongman or ruling faction maintains power through intimidation and violence. Their word becomes law. Citizens obey out of fear rather than unity. Punishments are swift and severe. Exile, forced labor, confiscation of food, or worse. These authoritarian enclaves justify their brutality by claiming that only iron rule can hold back the infected, the raiders, or the chaos lurking outside their fences. And in some ways, they're not entirely wrong. In a world where hesitation can kill you, decisive cruelty often masquerades as strength. As settlements grow more independent, trade becomes both a necessity and a battleground. Food, medicine, fuel, ammunition, clean water, scrap metal, each holds immense value, and every community has something another lacks. But nothing comes free. Leaders negotiate deals with the same intensity old governments once used in international diplomacy. Tariffs emerge, sometimes fair, sometimes absurdly exploitative. Settlement A might charge a toll for safe passage through their land. Settlement B might monopolize water purification tablets. Settlement C trades only with groups who swear neutrality. Alliances form not through idealism, but practicality. In a world shrinking by the day, commerce becomes its own kind of war. To maintain internal stability, many settlements establish security forces, some resembling police, others closer to militias or secret police units. These groups monitor disputes, enforce curfews, and prevent insurrection. The threat of a coup is real. With resources scarce and authority contested, power changes hands fast and violently if left unchecked. Patrols walk the streets, making sure no one hoards more food than their ration or spreads panic-inducing rumors. They quell fights, confiscate contraband, and keep a close eye on anyone who shows too much ambition or charisma. Trust is rare. Loyalty is demanded. Even in democratic settlements, security teams exist not just to protect the people, but to protect the leadership from the people. In just half a year, the survivors haven't merely created communities. They've built fractured, fledgling nations, each with its own culture, rules, borders, and vision of the future. Some dream of rebuilding civilization. Others cling to power. Others simply try to endure another day. And as these micronations grow stronger, so do the divides between them, setting the stage for alliances, rivalries, and wars yet to come. By the 6-month mark, the infected are no longer viewed as temporary horrors that will eventually burn themselves out. They have become a permanent, grotesque part of the world's new ecosystem. Survivors who once thought of zombies as mindless monsters now observe them the way biologists might study predators, because understanding their behavior is no longer optional. It is survival. City ruins, forests, abandoned suburbs, and cracked highways have reshaped themselves around the infected, and in turn the infected have adapted to the landscape in disturbing, almost natural ways. They are not random anymore, not chaotic. There is a purpose, an instinct to their movements, their habits, their new patterns of existence. The world itself has grown quieter, more feral, and in that silence the infected move like storms, guided by invisible winds. One of the most terrifying changes is the appearance of massive herd migrations. Every few weeks, a river of infected spills through the shattered skeletons of cities, thousands moving with uncanny synchronization. No one knows what triggers these migrations: weather, sound, internal instincts, or the decay cycle of the virus. But when a horde begins to shift, every survivor within miles can feel the tremor of it. From rooftops or lookout towers, people watch the endless tide of bodies surge across streets, weaving between abandoned vehicles and collapsed buildings. Their collective growls echo like distant thunder. Settlements caught in the path have two options: flee or be erased. Entire neighborhoods are swallowed in hours, their barricades crushed under sheer numbers. Survivors have learned to track these migrations, mark their schedules on hand-drawn maps, and pray they remain predictable. Even more unsettling is the discovery of dormant infected, creatures that appear frozen, lifeless, even harmless, especially in cold climates. They slump against walls, half buried in snow, or lie collapsed in alleyways like corpses that finally gave up. But this illusion is deadly. These infected are not dead. They are hibernating, slowed to a near motionless state, but fully aware. The slightest sound, a crunch of ice, a dropped tool, a whispered conversation, can jolt them awake with horrifying speed. Scavengers who mistake these statues for harmless bodies often never return. Winter hasn't weakened the infected. It has camouflaged them. As weeks turn into months, survivors begin noticing new behaviors, patterns that suggest adaptation rather than decay. Some infected gather in dark, enclosed spaces like basements, parking garages, or collapsed tunnels, almost as if they are nesting. These places become dens, cluttered with debris, bones, scraps of clothing, and whatever else they drag inside. Some survivors swear the infected protect these sites, lashing out with greater aggression if anyone gets too close. Others claim the dens are where new mutations emerge, shaped by close quarters and shared infection. What once looked like random gathering now resembles territorial behavior, more like that of pack animals than mindless undead. Perhaps the most ominous sign of this evolving ecosystem is the disappearance of wildlife. Birds have migrated far from infected zones. Deer, raccoons, stray dogs, animals once seen scavenging in the early days, are now rare even in rural areas. Survivors trekking through forests find eerie silence where birdsong once filled the air. The infected hunt anything that moves, their instincts triggered by warmth, motion, and scent. Tracks end abruptly in drag marks. Bones with gnaw marks litter forest floors. As animals vanish, the infected face fewer distractions, turning their focus increasingly toward human settlements. Some survivors fear that as the infected consume the last of the wildlife, they will grow even hungrier, even more aggressive, and perhaps even more coordinated. What becomes undeniable is that the infected are no longer simply a threat. They are part of the world's new balance. Just as wolves shaped ancient human societies, the infected shape the survivors' movements, their systems, their territory planning. The apocalypse is no longer framed by human choices alone. It is dictated by this monstrous ecosystem that grows, shifts, and adapts with each passing month. To survive, humanity must not only fear the infected, they must study them, anticipate them, and respect the grim laws of the new world that the infected now dominate. By the 6th month of the apocalypse, the collapse of formal governments and law enforcement hasn't extinguished human commerce. It has twisted it into something darker, more desperate, and far more dangerous. With resources scarce and settlements transforming into isolated micronations, a new kind of economy rises in the shadows, one driven not by trust or cooperation, but by secrecy, exploitation, and risk. These black markets don't exist in physical buildings or bustling squares. They emerge in burned-out warehouses, highway tunnels, collapsed subway stations, or abandoned farmhouses where lights are never used, and meetings take place only when coded messages or hand-delivered notes give the signal. In a world where every bullet, pill, or scrap of fuel can determine the fate of entire communities, trade becomes both lifeline and weapon, and the people who control it become power brokers in the ruins. Smugglers are among the first to adapt to this new order. Agile, cunning, and utterly fearless, they move between settlements using secret trails and back roads known only to them. They travel light, armed with little more than a pistol, a backpack, and a map etched into memory. Their goods vary: antibiotics scavenged from overrun clinics, gasoline siphoned from derelict trucks, solar batteries, scavenged weapon parts, insulin vials stored in portable coolers rigged from old camping gear. Smugglers rarely swear allegiance to any single settlement. They serve whoever pays, whoever protects, or whoever threatens them least. Some communities view them as heroes, bringing life-saving supplies that no official envoy could retrieve without provoking raiders or infected hordes. Others see them as criminals who destabilize the fragile peace, enriching themselves at the expense of the starving and desperate. But everyone, whether they admit it or not, needs them. Where smugglers provide goods, raiders provide chaos. Their marketplaces operate like circles of hell, dark corners where stolen tools, rusted guns, and scavenged fuel can be bought about if a survivor is willing to pay in rations, ammunition, or even prisoners. Hostages become currency. Information becomes a weapon to auction. Raiders trade knowledge of settlement defenses, patrol schedules, or hidden food caches. Sometimes they even sell survivors back to their own communities for a price. Their networks are brutal, yet efficient. The raiders know which settlements are growing weaker, which leaders are losing control, which factions are preparing for war, all through whispered exchanges and blood-stained deals struck under flickering lanterns. And then there are the forgeries, maps claiming to show routes to mythical safe zones, abandoned bunkers filled with military rations, or laboratories rumored to be working on a vaccine. Some maps are intricate works of art, hand-drawn with colored markers and lined with meticulous notes. Others are thrown together quickly, designed to lure desperate wanderers into ambushes or infected territory. These forgeries spread like wildfire, exchanged as contraband, or sold at steep prices to those clinging to hope. For every real safe zone, 10 false ones circulate, leading countless survivors into traps from which they never return. Settlements outlaw the possession of such maps, but that only increases their value. Hope, after all, is the most profitable commodity in the apocalypse. Hidden beneath all this physical exchange is a quieter, more elusive network, the secret radio channels. Criminals, rebels, and renegades hijack old frequencies to send coded messages, coordinate smuggling runs, warn of patrols, or threaten rival groups. Their broadcasts are brief, distorted, and impossible to trace. Some speak in riddles, others in static-laced phrases that sound like fragments of broken transmissions. These channels hum with life long after midnight, whispers threading through the dark, binding together people who should never meet in person. Settlements try to monitor these frequencies, but the shadow networks always stay one step ahead, shifting channels, changing encryption, or using Morse-like knock codes tapped into metal pipes beneath abandoned buildings. In a world stripped of structure, order, and oversight, the black markets and shadow networks thrive in the gaps. They are the arteries of a dying world, pulsing with opportunity and danger in equal measure. They deliver salvation to some, ruin to others, and power to those bold enough to operate in the darkness. 6 months after the collapse, it becomes clear that survival is not just about fighting the infected. It's also about navigating the invisible economy growing in the ruins, an economy where trust is fatal and information is priceless. By the 6-month mark, the infrastructure of the old world, once taken for granted, once invisible in its reliability, finally begins to collapse for good. The systems that powered modern civilization were never designed to exist without constant human maintenance, and now, without engineers, city crews, or supply chains to keep them alive, everything starts to fail at once. Roads crack and buckle without repairs, bridges sag under their own weight, and buildings groan like dying giants as wind and rain erode their foundations. Technology flickers out one piece at a time. The world is not just post-apocalyptic now. It is actively crumbling, sinking deeper into ruin each day. Survivors watch helplessly as the last threads connecting them to their former lives snap one by one. Across cities and suburbs, cell towers are among the first casualties. Their once blinking lights are dark, their metal frames rusting from 6 months of storms and unchecked corrosion. Antennas twist and bend in the wind. Entire structures collapse after a single lightning strike or a strong gust. The digital world they once carried, calls, texts, internet, GPS, vanishes long before the towers themselves fall. But their physical destruction is a symbolic final blow. Survivors look up at the toppled spires tangled in power lines and realize that even if the virus vanished tomorrow, the world they knew could never come back quickly, if at all. Attempts to revive communication systems become nearly impossible as the last functioning towers die off, leaving communities isolated, blind, and voiceless. Fuel, once hoarded like treasure, becomes unreliable as well. Gasoline left sitting in car tanks and rusted jerry cans begins to go stale, turning into sludge that chokes engines and stalls generators. Vehicles that survived the early chaos now sputter and cough themselves to death. The great mobility of the old world, cars, trucks, motorcycles, even chainsaws and lawnmowers, slowly grinds to a halt. Survivors who rely on scavenged gasoline find themselves stranded miles from home as engines fail mid-journey. Mechanics try filtering or distilling old fuel, but success is rare. A single working vehicle becomes a community's lifeline and symbol of power, guarded fiercely and used sparingly. The horizon feels farther away than ever. With fuel fading and traditional power sources dying, solar panels suddenly become some of the most valuable items in the wasteland. Rooftops once ignored by looters are now battlegrounds as settlements send scavengers to strip panels from abandoned suburban homes. Battery banks and inverters become precious artifacts, traded like gold, protected behind locked gates, or guarded by armed sentries. Some settlements manage to restore a handful of solar-powered lights or run a small water pump, their flickering glow becoming a beacon in the darkness, one that often invites trouble. Raiders, desperate for electricity to power radios, tools, or heating systems, target solar-equipped enclaves with ruthless efficiency. Skirmishes break out over single solar kits, and entire communities make alliances simply to defend shared power sources. In a world starved for light, energy becomes a currency of survival. Beneath the cities, the old world decays in far more dangerous ways. Flooded subway tunnels turn into labyrinths of dark water, filled with debris, rusting train cars, and the bodies of infected that drift silently in the currents. The stagnant pools breed sickness, and their damp air carries a foul chemical tang. Above ground, abandoned industrial zones become chemical death traps. Tanks leak toxic gases or ooze rainbow-colored sludge into drainage systems. Rainstorms wash pollutants into rivers and sewers, creating pockets of poisoned water that can burn skin or contaminate entire food stores. Survivors learn to avoid certain neighborhoods entirely, places where one wrong step can mean inhaling fumes strong enough to kill, or stumbling into biohazards left behind by forgotten factories. The collapse of infrastructure is not a single dramatic event. It is a slow, relentless unmaking of everything humanity once built. Each day, something else fails. A dam cracks. A power line snaps loose and drags across a road. An elevator plummets in a dead building. A water main bursts and floods an entire block. The old world dies not with an explosion, but with a long, agonizing sigh. And as it does, survivors face a harsh truth. Civilization isn't just gone. The world is reshaping itself into something entirely new, something primal, wild, and unforgiving. To survive in it, they must let go of what once was and learn to live with what remains. 6 months after the world fell apart, the greatest power no longer belongs to those with the most guns, food, or territory. It belongs to the people who can keep others alive. With hospitals gutted, doctors dead or missing, and medical supply chains erased, anyone with even a fragment of medical knowledge becomes priceless. Settlements revolve around their healers like planets around a dying sun. Amateur surgeons, once mechanics, butchers, or med students who never finished training, are now community heroes. Their hands are steady, their eyes hollow, their aprons stained with improvised antiseptics and hope. They operate on kitchen tables illuminated by solar lamps, their tools boiled in salvaged water, their sutures made from fishing line or thread pulled from old clothing. Every operation is a gamble. Every life saved is a miracle. Every loss is an open wound the community feels collectively. As modern medicine fades into myth, old world herbal knowledge returns with force. Herbalists, once dismissed as eccentric hobbyists, now train apprentices beneath the shade of overgrown porches or beside makeshift greenhouses. They identify wild plants that can reduce fever, clean wounds, stop bleeding, or dull pain. Books on natural remedies become rare treasures, their pages worn thin from constant reference. Communities send foragers deep into forests searching for medicinal herbs, mushrooms, and tree bark, treating these resources with the same reverence once given to antibiotics. Though far from perfect, these remedies often mean the difference between life and death. In the shadows, however, the desperation for a cure spawns something far more dangerous. Rogue scientists, self-taught chemists, and fringe groups with just enough knowledge to be lethal begin experimenting with improvised vaccines and antivirals. They test mixtures of herbs, animal serums, old pharmaceuticals, and infected tissue extracts, believing that somewhere in these crude concoctions lies salvation or evolution. Some subjects volunteer, hoping for immunity. Others are not given a choice. The results vary: mild improvement, catastrophic illness, violent mutation. Fear and hope intertwine in these clandestine labs, lit by flickering lanterns and reeking of chemicals and decay. The line between healer and madman blurs. Medical ethics, once guarded fiercely by society, erode under the weight of scarcity. Triage decisions become executions in disguise. A healer looks at two wounded survivors, one with a treatable infection and one with a crushed spine, and chooses which one gets the last vial of antibiotics. The choice is clinical, rational, and devastating. Families beg, scream, or bargain, but there are not enough supplies to save everyone. Some communities enforce triage laws that prioritize the youngest, the strongest, or the most skilled. Others leave the decision entirely to the healer's judgment, an unbearable burden that haunts them long after the wounded have fallen silent. 6 months in, the rise of the healer is both a blessing and a curse, because in the apocalypse, every life saved comes with the memory of those who were left behind. As resources dwindle and territory shrinks, old grudges ignite into open conflict. What began as whispered tensions between settlements has become full-fledged warfare. Farmland, the foundation of long-term survival, is the most coveted prize, and the conservers and raiders clash over it with brutal determination. The conservers plow the soil, build irrigation channels, and guard their crops like treasure. The raiders, unwilling to grow their own food, strike fast and mercilessly, burning fields they can't steal and ambushing harvest teams. Entire nights glow orange from the fires of raided homesteads. Every season becomes a battle season. The isolationists, living behind fortified borders and barbed wire, take an even harsher approach. Anything that crosses into their territory, human, animal, infected, is met with traps, warning shots, or silent elimination. Their lands are mined, booby-trapped, and patrolled with sniper nests. They refuse trade, alliances, and communication. To them, every outsider is a threat, every unknown face a future traitor. Their maps show only one designation beyond their walls: danger. Yet rumors persist that the isolationists possess stockpiles of supplies untouched since the early days, enough to feed dozens of communities if anyone could breach their iron defenses. Meanwhile, the pilgrims wander between these warring factions, carrying messages, lost survivors, and stories of places untouched by violence. They want no part in the wars. Their mission is movement, faith, and the search for a safe place that might not even exist. Pilgrims are tolerated at best, distrusted at worst. Some see them as spies. Others accuse them of hiding information, like the true location of rumored safe zones or caches of medical supplies. But the pilgrims continue on, choosing hope over conflict, even as gunfire echoes across the wasteland behind them. Amid this chaos, whispers begin circulating about a new faction, the Reclaimers. Little is known about them, only that they are gathering survivors with military backgrounds, engineers, and leaders disillusioned by the small-minded territorial wars. Their goal? Retake a major city, clear it block by block, and rebuild true civilization. Some believe they're a myth, a symbol of hope conjured by desperate communities. Others swear they've seen their banners, their scouts, or their early outposts marked with white paint and the symbol of a rising sun. Whether they are saviors or conquerors remains unknown, but their emergence sends a ripple of fear and possibility across the land. Faction lines harden, borders expand or collapse, alliances shift like unstable tectonic plates. 6 months after the fall, the battle for survival is no longer against the infected alone. It's against each other. 6 months in, scientists studying the virus thought its evolution might plateau, that it would eventually reach a stable form and stop changing. They were wrong. Instead of fading, the virus adapts in new, terrifying ways. Some infected begin moving in coordinated groups, as if guided by a shared instinct or a rudimentary pack intelligence. Scouts on watchtowers report seeing 3 or 4 infected signaling to one another with guttural grunts or scraping sounds, their movements synchronized when they attack or hunt. These packs are efficient, strategic, and far more deadly than lone roamers. Settlements hit by them describe the encounters as ambushes rather than accidents. Other infected show signs of slower decay. Their flesh doesn't slough off as quickly. Their muscles remain intact for months instead of weeks. These long-lasting infected pose a growing threat. They can chase, climb, or fight far longer than the earlier waves. Survivors call them stubborns or iron bloods. Their eyes remain disturbingly bright, and they stalk prey with eerie patience. The most horrifying new mutation appears in the form of screechers, infected with elongated vocal cords or damaged throats that produce a high-pitched, piercing scream capable of summoning hordes from miles away. These creatures hide in dark corners or collapsed buildings, and the moment they detect movement, they unleash their shriek. Survivors who hear it describe the sound as physically painful, like a blade being dragged across bone. A single screecher can turn a quiet scavenging run into a full-scale siege. Scientists, those few still alive, scramble to record and analyze these mutations. Their makeshift laboratories are cluttered with scribbled notes, preserved samples, and corpses dissected with improvised tools. They document patterns, measure reaction times, and observe brain function using battery-powered equipment. What they discover terrifies them. Evidence of communication between infected. Brain scans show synchronized neural activity. Tissue samples reveal chemical signaling similar to insect colonies or wolf packs. The infected are not just evolving, they are organizing. 6 months in, the survivors face a grim truth. Humanity may not only be losing the battle, but may not even understand the true nature of the enemy. As the world collapses into chaos, people who disappeared during the earliest days of the outbreak begin to re-emerge like ghosts rising from the ruins. They return in small clusters or alone, staggering out of forests, abandoned tunnels, and shattered cities. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes feral, their instincts animalistic. These lost months survivors have endured horrors unimaginable: starvation, isolation, constant pursuit. And in their desperation, they have developed new methods of survival that seem almost alien to the more structured settlements. They move silently, communicate with gestures instead of words, and navigate by scent, shadow, and instinct. Some wear armor fashioned from scrap metal or animal bones. Others carry weapons so crude and brutal they resemble tools of ancient tribes. Their return is both a miracle and a warning. Survival changes everyone. When these wanderers reunite with families who long ago mourned them as dead, the emotional impact is seismic. Parents collapse in tears as children they believed devoured by the infected stumble through the gates, older and hardened beyond their years. Lovers embrace like strangers, struggling to reconcile memory with the haunted figure returned to them. Not every reunion is peaceful. Some returnees cannot handle the noise or the closeness of community. They sleep outside walls, flinch at raised voices, and wake screaming from nightmares that never left them. Most disturbing of all are the rumors of survivors who return showing signs of infection: clouded eyes, twitching muscles, violent impulses, but remain conscious and aware. Their minds flicker between lucidity and primal urges, like two beings trapped in one failing body. Scientists and healers approach them with equal parts fascination and horror, believing they may hold keys to immunity or mutation. Settlements fear them, whispering that they are ticking time bombs that could transform at any moment. Many are quietly sent away. A few beg to stay. Their existence reshapes everything humanity thought it understood. Among the stories shared by these lost months survivors are tales of underground bunkers still operating, hidden research labs that never contacted the outside world, and enclaves that sealed themselves away in darkness. Some claim these places held hope. Others insist they produced monsters. Whether these bunkers still exist, or their inhabitants will eventually emerge, remains an unsettling mystery. As months turn into a new era, the children growing up in the apocalypse begin forming the backbone of the future. Their education is no longer filled with textbooks, playgrounds, or tidy classrooms. Instead, survival becomes the curriculum. Combat training blends seamlessly into daily chores. Learning to gut fish, mend fences, and shoot a bow are taught with the same seriousness once reserved for math or science. A child might spend the morning helping harvest vegetables and the afternoon learning to disarm a snare or spot infected tracks in the mud. Kids, small and agile, become scouts and messengers between settlements. They slip through ruined buildings and crawl under wreckage with ease, moving quietly as shadows. Adults rely on them for eyes and ears in places grown-ups can't reach or don't dare venture. Some children form tight-knit groups that operate like small guilds, communicating with coded whistles or tapping signals. When they travel through cities, they leave behind graffiti symbols, cryptic marks that warn of dangers, safe paths, or secret caches. Over time, these spray-painted messages evolve into a silent language understood only by the young. Formal education dwindles. Books are scarce treasures, their pages patched with tape or cloth. Lessons in reading and writing become cherished luxuries offered only a few hours a week, if someone in the settlement still remembers how to teach. Most children grow up knowing only fragments of the old world. Stories of machines that flew, stores filled with endless food, cities that lit up like stars. They accept these tales with the same skepticism and wonder earlier generations reserved for myths. Yet even in this harsh world, the spark of curiosity endures. Children ask the questions adults fear. They imagine futures adults no longer dare envision. And in their small, stubborn way, they begin to rebuild the idea of humanity. As settlements expand, they inevitably face a question no one wanted to revisit. How do you govern the ruins of a broken world? Without old institutions, communities begin experimenting with new forms of society, some hopeful, others horrifying. A handful of settlements attempt to rebuild through worker cooperatives, where every member contributes labor and decisions are made collectively. These places feel strangely hopeful, buzzing with plans for rebuilding farms, rewiring old buildings for solar power, and erecting community centers where once schools stood. The success of such places depends entirely on the people within them, and their optimism often makes them targets for raiders or rival factions. Other communities adopt rotational leadership, believing no one person should hold power long enough to abuse it. Every season, authority shifts to new hands. This constant change keeps corruption in check, but also leads to chaos when leaders prove incompetent or overly idealistic. Farming fails, supply routes break, or defenses weaken, all because one cycle placed power in the wrong individual's hands. Still, some settlements thrive under this system, driven by trust and shared responsibility. But not all experiments lean toward fairness. Some settlements fall under harsh militaristic rule, where survival is enforced through strict discipline, curfews, and public punishments. These places function efficiently, but breathe fear. Citizens work like soldiers, every action measured against what is necessary for survival. Leaders in these societies rarely step down willingly. Coup attempts and executions become common, turning the settlement into a powder keg waiting to explode. Every experiment carries risk, and many end in catastrophe. Failed governance models lead to exile, entire families driven out for dissent, or executions meant to deter rebellion. Some settlements crumble entirely, their survivors scattering to nearby communities as living warnings of what not to attempt. Yet through these trials, humanity pushes forward, searching for a system strong enough to survive the infected and flexible enough to rebuild a world worth living in. Half a year after the fall, scavenging, the backbone of early survival, begins to collapse. The easy supplies are long gone. The shelves of grocery stores have been stripped bare. Pharmacies hold only broken bottles and moldy boxes. Cars sit empty, their fuel siphoned months ago. The great scavenge runs that once sustained entire settlements now return with almost nothing but injuries and losses. Caravans must travel far beyond known safe zones, pushing into wild territories where infected roam freely, and other desperate survivors lurk like predators. The journeys grow longer and more dangerous. Scavengers find themselves navigating collapsed bridges, forest-choked highways, and cities so infested they are considered lost lands. Only the bravest, or most reckless, volunteer for these missions now. Abandoned warehouses, once guaranteed treasure troves, become battlegrounds riddled with traps. Tripwires line the halls, pressure plates trigger explosive charges, and hidden snipers guard their claimed territories. Some scavenger teams vanish entirely, their fates unknown. Others return bleeding, shaken, carrying stories of rival groups who kill first and negotiate never. Underground stores, bunkers, old storm shelters, forgotten utility rooms become the new gold mines. Their sealed environments sometimes preserve food, medical supplies, or rare tools. But reaching these vaults means navigating tight spaces where a single infected can mean death. Still, the rewards are too valuable to ignore. Settlements fight over maps, rumors, and clues about hidden caches. With each passing month, cities become nearly impossible to navigate. Roads crumble. Buildings collapse. Roaming hordes fill entire districts. The great scavenge runs aren't just ending, they're becoming suicidal. Survivors now face the grim truth. If they want to endure, they must create more than they take. When winter finally ends, its legacy lingers like a scar carved across the land. Frozen hordes that stood motionless in the snow begin to thaw and reanimate. Settlements that once celebrated the cold for slowing the infected now watch in horror as ice melts from stiffened limbs and dead eyes blink open once more. These thawed infected move unpredictably, their joints stiff, their minds confused, but their hunger undiminished. Some drag themselves in twitching motions before regaining full mobility. Others seem enraged by the cold's lingering ache in their bodies, attacking with unusual ferocity. The harsh winter starved many communities. Food stores ran low, fires burned out, and people weakened from illness. Settlements emerge from the freeze thinner, quieter, and more desperate. Some lost half their population to the cold alone. Those who survived learned harsh lessons. Ration better, conserve more, prepare earlier. Hunters return from the wilderness carrying reports that shake even the sturdiest survivors. Sightings of undead animals. Frozen wolves thawing and staggering across the snow. Deer with cloudy eyes but steady legs. Birds dropping from trees with rotting wings. Whether these creatures were infected before the freeze or transformed during it is unclear, but the idea of the virus spreading beyond humans terrifies the remaining scientific minds. Winter changes migration routes too. Survivors begin drifting toward warmer climates, hoping to avoid another season like the last. Settlements in the south swell with newcomers, sparking tension and overcrowding. Others choose to remain where they are, building better shelters, storing more supplies, and praying the next winter will be kinder. It won't be. In the midst of ruin and constant threat, something unexpected begins to happen. People start creating again. Around campfires and within heavily guarded walls, survivors craft songs, stories, and poems about the outbreak. Tales of heroism and loss circulate, shaping legends from real tragedies. Music becomes a rare and powerful comfort. Someone strumming a salvaged guitar can quiet an entire settlement. These creative sparks remind survivors that they are more than the sum of their fears. New superstitions emerge as people search for meaning in the chaos. Some believe infected avoid certain scents or flee from specific sounds. Others carry charms, bones, feathers, scraps of cloth as protection. These beliefs spread quickly, becoming cultural rituals that influence daily life. Whether they truly help or simply offer hope, no one can say. Tokens of remembrance also become important. Survivors collect mementos of the old world, rings, photographs, dog tags, patches from uniforms. These objects evolve into symbols of identity and resistance. Some settlements even create new festivals or ceremonies honoring those lost or celebrating those who survived another month. Meanwhile, new religions rise from the ashes. Some worship survival itself, interpreting endurance as divine selection. Others build faith around sacrifice, believing that those who gave their lives ensured the future. A few groups claim immunity is a sacred gift, and immune survivors become living icons, revered or feared depending on the doctrine. These emerging belief systems reshape communities, influencing laws, traditions, and alliances. Cultural evolution becomes the first true sign that humanity is not just surviving, it is transforming. And in this bleak, uncertain world, culture becomes a quiet rebellion against extinction. 6 months after the outbreak, a quiet revolution begins. One not fought with weapons, but with static, wires, and faint voices carried across dead air. For the first time since civilization collapsed, breakthroughs in communication offer a flicker of the connectivity that once defined the world. In small, determined workshops lit by flickering lanterns, scavenged radios are reassembled piece by piece. Broken transmitters are rewired using parts from old car dashboards, aircraft consoles, and whatever scraps can be salvaged. Eventually, after months of failure and frustration, the static shifts, and a distant voice cuts through the silence. Two settlements hundreds of miles apart exchange their first words since the fall. The moment is monumental. It spreads like wildfire. Communication is possible again. Soon after, survivors establish crude but effective Morse code relays connecting multiple towns in a chain of cooperation. A tap from one village becomes a pulse carried through several outposts, eventually reaching people who never knew one another existed. These rhythms of dots and dashes form a new kind of music, one of hope, warning, guidance, and solidarity. Every settlement that joins the network reduces its isolation, increasing its chance of survival. But not all signals are friendly. One night, across a wide stretch of abandoned territory, a mysterious broadcast begins repeating on a previously silent frequency. It is faint, distorted, almost mechanical. Sometimes it issues warnings about approaching hordes. Other times, it conveys what sound like instructions. No one can tell if the signal is automated, controlled by a hidden settlement, or something darker. Some claim the voice isn't fully human. Others insist it's the last echo of a government bunker. Settlements argue over whether to trust it, fear it, or track it. As communication strengthens, attempts to rebuild a postal route emerge. Brave couriers, often young, fast-footed runners, carry satchels of letters between settlements. These messages contain alliances, trade offers, intelligence, and sometimes desperate pleas for help. The couriers become lifelines, celebrated like heroes and mourned like family when they don't return. Through them, the world begins stitching itself back together, thread by fragile thread. The discovery begins quietly. One survivor falls ill with the infection, collapses in fevered delirium, and then, impossibly, recovers. Then another, and another. A rare group emerges, semi-immune individuals. They are not fully resistant. They suffer through the sickness, but survive what should be a death sentence. Their bite wounds heal, their symptoms fade, their minds remain intact. For the first time since the world fell, the infected virus shows a crack. These individuals instantly become the most valuable and most hunted people alive. Settlements with 1 or 2 semi-immune citizens guard them day and night, treating them as walking miracles. Their blood becomes the new gold, sparking desperate efforts to create vaccines or treatments. Amateur scientists and seasoned healers alike work feverishly, drawing samples, experimenting with crude centrifuges and improvised lab gear. Most attempts fail. A few produce faint glimmers of potential. None offer a cure, yet. Factions take a darker approach. Raiders and warlords fight brutally to capture semi-immune survivors, believing possession of one grants absolute power. Some groups attempt forced blood harvesting or chained breeding programs, sparking some of the most horrific conflicts since the outbreak began. Settlements respond by forming secret networks to hide and protect the semi-immune, whisking them away through underground tunnels or disguised convoys. But the semi-immune raise dangerous questions. Are they the next step in human evolution? A mutation triggered by the outbreak? A blessing or a curse waiting to unfold? Some exhibit strange symptoms, elevated senses, resistance to cold, or nightmares that feel more like visions. Others report hearing infected nearby before anyone else does. Whispers spread of semi-immune survivors showing signs of partial connection to the infected's strange new behaviors. Hope and fear intermingle. Their existence might save the world, or crack it further. After 6 months of chaos, communities reach a crossroad. They can no longer simply survive. They must decide what comes next. And these choices split humanity into sharply defined paths. Some choose to rebuild, dreaming of resurrecting civilization brick by brick. They erect fortified schools, reclaim farmland, draft charters, and elect councils. These settlements represent the last ember of the old world's ideals, clinging to order, education, and cooperation as if they were sacred relics. Their communities grow steadily, drawing in families and refugees hungry for stability. Others embrace a nomadic lifestyle, believing permanence is impossible in a world dominated by migrating hordes and shifting dangers. They form caravans of wagons, bicycles, and modified vehicles, traveling the land like ancient tribes. Their children grow up under open skies. Their homes move with the seasons. They avoid wars, trade freely, and leave no traces behind. The isolationists retreat deeper into forests, mountains, bunkers, and fortresses, sealing themselves off from all strangers. They trust no one. Some fire warning shots at anyone who approaches. Others vanish entirely, choosing to become myths, ghost communities invisible to the rest of the world. And then there are those who believe survival requires dominance. These emerging warlords and militaristic factions adopt a philosophy of conquer and control. They absorb neighboring towns, seize farmland, impose iron rule, and build armies. They argue that only a unified, disciplined force can reclaim the world from the infected and from the chaos of humans. These philosophies clash. Alliances form between like-minded settlements. Rivalries ignite where ideologies collide. The Great Divide shapes not only the politics of survival, but the battlefield of the future. Then comes the first mega-horde. Survivors hear it before they see it. A low, rumbling roar carried by the wind, like thunder rolling endlessly across concrete canyons. Tens of thousands of infected move as one, not wandering, migrating. They flow through cities in massive rivers of bodies, trampling cars, crushing fences, and shaking the earth under sheer force of numbers. Megahordes travel in purposeful lines, triggered by storms, distant signals, or instincts humanity doesn't yet understand. Some seem attracted to seismic vibrations. Others respond to strange frequencies detected by improvised radios. A few appear to follow migratory paths like ancient herds. The infected ecosystem is no longer random. It is evolving. Any settlement caught in a megahorde's path is erased overnight. Walls buckle. Defenders are overwhelmed in minutes. Survivors flee with only seconds to spare, abandoning everything they built. The aftermath is silence and ruin. Communities develop emergency evacuation protocols. Bags always packed, plans always rehearsed. Scouts are trained to detect distant rumbling. Tower guards memorize smoke signals used to warn neighbors. Entire regions coordinate their escape routes, knowing one mistake could mean extinction. The megahordes are not just threats, they are omens. Something massive, uncontrollable, and intelligent is stirring within the infected. And then, in defiance of the darkness, humanity achieves a milestone once thought impossible. The first reclaimed city block. A coalition of builders, fighters, engineers, and dreamers undertakes a daring mission, clearing and fortifying one block of a major city. They purge buildings room by room, seal entire sewer lines, collapse infected nests, and erect makeshift walls using cars, steel plates, and debris. It takes weeks of brutal fighting and sleepless nights. When the block is finally secured, something extraordinary happens. Survivors plant crops in what used to be a park, turning cracked soil into rows of green life. A workshop rises in an old auto garage, sparks flying as blacksmiths and mechanics collaborate. A medical clinic is established in a former office building, its rooms cleaned and stocked with salvaged equipment. And atop a single rooftop, after countless failures, a generator sputters to life, restoring electricity to one building. The lights flicker, then glow steady. People cheer. Some cry. For a moment it feels like the world might still have a future. The reclaimed block becomes both a sanctuary and a symbol, a blueprint for rebuilding civilization. But it also paints a target on those who guard it. The night air is thick with tension when the radio finally hums to life. Static crackles across the frequencies, sharp and unpredictable, until a voice, steady, human, impossibly real, breaks through. At first, many settlements think it is another trick, a prank, or a desperate hallucination. But the details are precise, measured, and unmistakable. Coordinates, a list of resources, the presence of functioning laboratories, powered generators, and armed personnel. Medical staff, clean water, shelter. For the first time since the outbreak, hope isn't whispered, it is broadcast. Across dozens of settlements, people drop to their knees or stare at their radios, mouths open. The sound spreads like wildfire. Children hear it, adults hear it, and even hardened militia members pause mid-argument to listen. This is not a rumor, a map, or a story from some wandering pilgrim. This is real. Somewhere beyond the ruins, humanity has not only survived, it has held its ground, preserved knowledge, and built something that could save everyone. Chaos erupts almost immediately. Settlements light fires to signal their departure. Caravans are packed in frantic hours, hastily fortified with whatever weapons and supply highs can be carried. Scouts race ahead, mapping paths and marking hazards. Small alliances form, sometimes between former enemies, as everyone realizes this might be the only chance to secure the future. Arguments flare. Who should go first? Who gets priority for limited supplies? Who will lead the convoy? The journey itself is perilous. Roads long overrun with debris and rotting vehicles become choke points. Megahordes have migrated through familiar territories, leaving only devastation behind. Abandoned cities are haunted with both infected and desperate survivors willing to kill for scraps. Every mile is a test of coordination, strategy, and nerve. Yet the knowledge of a safe zone drives people forward, giving them courage they didn't know they had. Rumors swirl as caravans converge on the route. Some claim the safe zone is experimental, only partially functional. Others swear the infected outside are more dangerous, sensing the pull of life and electricity. Even as hope rises, fear gnaws at the edges. Everyone knows that getting there will demand sacrifice, but the promise of functioning laboratories, medicines, and armed protection, the possibility of research that could finally turn the tide, makes every risk worthwhile. As the first light of day touches ruined highways and broken skylines, settlements on the move begin to see one another, converging along dirt paths, abandoned railroads, and forested corridors. Flags are raised, signals exchanged, and a fragile sense of order emerges amidst chaos. Children cling to parents, warriors scan the tree line, and healers clutch their precious medical kits. The safe zone is more than coordinates on a map. It is the first glimmer of a world that could be rebuilt. By the time scouts glimpse walls, fences, and watchtowers in the distance, the impact is undeniable. Humanity is coming together, carrying the remnants of civilization with them, drawn by a promise of survival that until now had existed only in desperate dreams. For the first time in half a year, the apocalypse does not feel endless. It feels like a challenge with an answer, a path forward. And everyone knows that whatever awaits inside those walls, nothing and no one will ever be the same again. The static hums softly, then fades as the voice comes through once more, calm but urgent. This is not just a message. This is a warning and a promise. The world beyond your walls is broken. The infected are relentless, and the nights grow colder with every passing moment. But somewhere out there is hope. A place where knowledge survives, where hands still heal, and where humanity is not surrendered. Take what you've learned, gather who you trust, and move carefully. The road will be long, the dangers countless, and the choices harsh. But for those willing to brave it, there is a chance to see the sun rise on a world worth fighting for. Remember this, survival is not enough. We endure to reclaim, we endure to remember, and we endure to rise. Stay vigilant, stay strong. And when you hear this voice again, let it guide you to what remains of tomorrow. The radio clicks, then returns to static. The silence that follows is heavy, charged with fear, determination, and an unspoken question. Who will make it there first?